I am Gregory Hallows, and this is Preserve Halloween Podcast. So this is part 2 of our story on Folklore of Watching the Dark and the Long Night Watchers. We wanted to split it up into 2 episodes just because it just formatically fit that way better. So welcome back. If you haven't listened to part 1 of this podcast, I suggest you do that first. So we're going to just continue and pick up right where we left off. By the heart of winter, rituals grew quieter. The noise of festivals faded. What remained were habits meant to maintain balance. Leaving a lamp burning overnight, placing chairs facing inward, keeping doors latched but not locked, avoiding mirrors after dark. These were not superstitions, they were negotiations. Winter folklore was never about banishing spirits entirely. It was about containment. Stay there. We will stay here. We will endure this season together. And this belief shaped the ghost traditions that followed, not just in villages, but eventually in cities, in literature, in the stories told during the longest nights of the year. Because once people learn to sit with winter silence, they learn to listen, and winter always speaks back. What began as seasonal fear has become domestic haunting. What began outdoors now presses against the interior world. What began as legend now becomes memory. And in the next stretch of the night, as winter folklore turns inward, reflective, and deeply psychological, these stories grow quieter and far more unsettling. Winter does not merely arrive, it claims. The world of winter folklore has moved past first snowfall and early fear. The roads are no longer uncertain, they are empty. The forests no longer whisper, they wait. And the stories told at this stage of the season are no longer warnings meant to prevent danger. They are stories told after loss has already occurred. Across Europe and far beyond it, the deepest winter legends emerge from this middle stretch of darkness. Not the turning of the year, not the promise of return, but the long, grinding heart of winter itself. When survival becomes routine, and hope must be remembered rather than felt. This is where folklore becomes colder. In many traditions, the spirits of winter change as the season deepens. Early winter brings watchers, Krampus, Perkten, roaming figures meant to discipline or frighten. But midwinter belongs to something else entirely. The lingering dead, the forgotten dead, the unburied dead. Not ghosts that knock or speak, but presences that exist because winter has stopped time. In Scandinavian folklore, this is the season when the Draugr grows strongest. Not the sea-walking undead of Saga fame, but the inland winter dead, bound to frozen ground they cannot leave. Their stories speak of bodies preserved by cold, minds locked in rage or longing, unable to decay, unable to move on. In Slavic traditions, this is when the Nav, restless souls of those who died without proper rites, are believed to wander near villages, drawn by smoke, by warmth, by the sound of human life continuing without them. In the British Isles, winter ghosts are quieter, but no less severe. This is the season of present stories, not apparitions, the sense that someone stands just beyond the firelight, listening. The belief that doors left open too long at night invite not thieves, but memory itself. The Victorians would later codify these feelings into fiction, but the emotional structure was already ancient. Winter is when the dead feel closest because the living are forced indoors, closer to their own thoughts. And those thoughts have weight. In alpine regions, this is the period when Perkton processions end, not because the danger is gone, but because it is now constant. The bells fall silent, the masks are stored away. The spirits no longer need to be chased. They are already here. Folklore from this phase speaks less of monsters seen and more of rules followed. Do not travel after dark unless necessary. Do not whistle in forests at night. Do not respond if your name is called from snow. Do not follow lights you cannot explain. These are not moral lessons. They are survival habits encoded into story. Even fire changes meaning here. Earlier in winter, fire is protection. In deep winter, fire is memory. Stories from Eastern Europe describe hearths burning for the dead, not offerings, not rituals, but acts of continuity. The belief is not that spirits need warmth, but that the living do, and that the dead remain present as long as warmth remains. This is the origin of many winter haunting concepts that later appear in literature. Rooms that feel occupied, chairs that seem turned, windows that frost in human shapes. Winter preserves. Bodies, yes, but also moments. This is why winter ghosts differ from autumn ghosts. Autumn ghosts cross boundaries. Winter ghosts stay. They are not messengers. They are reminders. In Germanic folklore, this is when the wild hunt shifts from movement to proximity. No longer racing across the sky, it is said to linger near tree lines, ridges, crossroads, watching. Not hunting, waiting for spring to break its hold. And throughout these traditions, one theme remains consistent. Winter spirits do not seek to frighten. They seek to exist alongside. And this is where the most unsettling ghost stories are born. Not the ones with screams, but the ones where nothing happens at all. A presence is felt, a silence held, a room that feels fuller than it should. These stories survive because they reflect the emotional truth of winter, that isolation amplifies memory, that stillness magnifies loss, that cold does not erase, it preserves. And it is from this preserved silence that the final hour will emerge. Because winter folklore does not end in despair. It ends in release. And the cold deepens as the night stretches on. Not the sharp, sudden cold of early winter, but the heavy, settled cold that comes after weeks of darkness. The kind that seeps into wood and stone, into stories and memory. The kind that makes old houses creak in unfamiliar ways and turns even familiar roads into uncertain paths. By this point in the winter calendar, ancient people believed the world itself had slowed. Crops were gone, animals were penned or slaughtered, travel was dangerous, isolation was common, and the living were forced inward, into homes, into firelight, into stories. And this is where winter folklore grows strongest, because when movement stops, imagination wakens. Across cultures, the deep winter period was believed to be a time when spirits were closest, not because they were invited, but because the barriers between worlds weakened under the weight of darkness. The sun hung low, shadows ruled longer than light, and the earth itself seemed to hold its breath. Winter was not just a season, it was a state of being. Stories told during this time weren't meant to entertain in the modern sense. They were meant to explain the feeling that something unseen was pressing closer, that the dead were nearer, that the old rules might not apply. This is why winter folklore so often centers on wandering spirits, lost travelers, abandoned children, watchers at the edge of firelight, voices heard in the wind, shapes seen where none should be. Not because winter creates ghosts, but because winter removes distractions. And in that silence, people notice what they usually ignore. In many traditions, winter spirits were not violent. They were mournful. They were reminders of fragility, of loss, of the cost of forgetting ritual and community, of the danger of arrogance in a season that demanded humility. We'll be right back after this quick break. I am Gregory Hallows, your voice behind the Preserve Halloween podcast and founder of the Halloween Preservation Society. Halloween is more than a holiday. It's history, folklore, and a tradition worth protecting. If you love the stories, the research, and the deep dives into Halloween I bring you, please consider supporting the Preserve Halloween podcast. Your support can help me with more research opportunities, including travel to locations relevant to Halloween history, and to bring you even more insight into the world's greatest holiday. Every one of your contributions, no matter the amount, helps keep the jack-o'-lantern glowing just a little bit longer. So support the show if you can, help me preserve the past, and keep Halloween history alive for generations to come. Check the links in the show description to find out more. And thank you. And now, back to the podcast. Some spirits were said to follow travelers, not to harm them, but to test them, to see if they respected the cold, the night, the land itself. Others lingered near homes, drawn to warmth and memory, listening for familiar voices of familiar songs. Firelight mattered, stories mattered, naming the darkness mattered. Because unnamed fear becomes panic, but named fear becomes tradition. This is the through line of winter folklore across centuries and borders. Humans did not try to banish the dark. They learned how to live inside it. And by the deepest part of winter, the stories themselves began to change. The tone shifts. Earlier winter tales warn, later winter tales prepare. As the calendar crept towards the solstice, fear slowly gave way to anticipation. Not because danger passed, but because people understood the rhythm. The darkness would peak, and then imperceptibly at first, the light would begin to return. This moment, the hinge of the year, was sacred, and it demanded its own stories. Stories not of wandering spirits alone, but of rebirth, return, renewal, and fires that refuse to go out. Stories of evergreen life, of feasting in defiance of scarcity, of singing loudly enough to remind the sun it was still wanted. Winter folklore does not end in despair, it bends. The atmosphere changes again. The cold remains, but now it is expectant. The darkness still dominates, but it no longer feels endless. The old stories begin to whisper a different message. Hold on. Light is coming, but only if you honor the night first. And this is the moment where ghosts step back, where wandering spirits retreat, where winter monsters fade into the trees, where the fire becomes central again. Because the next chapter of the winter arc is not about fear alone. It is about survival through ritual, about light held against darkness, about traditions older than churches, older than calendars, older than written history. It is about Yule. And Yule does not begin with joy. It begins with the longest night. Now the fire crackles lower now. Outside the wind eases just slightly. Not enough to signal safety, but enough to suggest change. Somewhere beyond the frozen fields and bare branches, the sun prepares its slow return. And humanity, as it always has, prepares to meet it with fire, with song, greenery, and memory. Winter has not loosened its grip yet, but the wheel has turned, and the stories are about to change. So, You've listened to our ongoing winter folklore arc, and we've been exploring the stories, the spirits, the traditions, all born in the longest nights of the year. And on our next podcast, we're going to step into the heart of the winter calendar. We're going to explore Yule, its ancient fires, the evergreen symbols, wild hunts, sacred feasts, the traditions that shaped everything from Christmas customs to modern seasonal folklore. But this was before Santa, before carols, before ornamented trees. The fire comes first. But until next time, stay strange, stay curious, stay spooky, and always preserve Halloween.